Paul lets us know for a certainty that God is faithful, and that's a promise of God, and He will not allow us as Christians to be tempted above that which we are able to bear. Right? That's a promise of God. God will never put more of a temptation on me than I am able to bear, right? That's true, okay? But, and there's always the but, okay? The avenue and the size of the temptation and the size, and this is my own way of trying to explain it, of escape in that temptation may vary. Now, let me explain to you what I mean. We're going to look in a little bit, we're going to look in Hebrews chapter 12, okay? Let us lay aside every weight and the sin which does so easily beset us. We all have different temptations that affect us differently, right? Okay? Brother Chuck has a besetting sin or a sin that weighs on him maybe more than me. Maybe he has a difficulty or a trial that maybe it doesn't bother me or it doesn't try me like it does Chuck, and vice versa. There may be one that I have that it doesn't bother him. That opening to get out of that temptation may be that big, easy to get through, okay? But for others, that same temptation may be the way of escape, may be no bigger than my finger. You see what I'm saying? And in other words, it may be easy for some, this big way to get out, but for others, the way of escape may be the size of a pin. Does that make sense? So, what I'd like to do this morning, right after I button my cuffs, I'd like to look at this morning of some ways for us to overcome temptation and the temptations and the trials that we face in life. Because I think that would affect everybody in here. Don't you think so? Is there anybody in here that doesn't have trials and temptations and difficulties? Well, that's something that we all can talk about because we all have difficulties and trials and temptations. So I got 3 ways this morning. 3 ways we can overcome temptation. You can write them down. And this is not an exhaustive list. I mean, there's tons of ways through Scripture we can overcome temptation. But here's 3 ways this morning I want us to look at. Number 1. Again, I want to reiterate, we all have our weaknesses. That's number 1. We have our weaknesses in our temptations. Turn to the book of Hebrews, chapter 12. There's a couple of these that we're going to spend just a little bit of time on, but there's one in particular that I want us to focus more of our time on. Hebrews chapter 12 and verse number 1. When Paul, or the Hebrew writer, looks in verse 11, he talks about, like we're doing on Wednesday night, the Hall of Faith, right? All of these great men and women who endured the trials and tribulations that they had to face. In verse number 1 of Hebrews 12, he says, therefore, or in other words, due to this fact, we also, who's we? That's us, okay? That will be us. We also, since we are surrounded by so great a cloud of witnesses, the witnesses would be those that were made mention of in chapter 11, okay? All these men and women, seeing that we are encompassed about, it's like we're standing here and all of these great witnesses of old are surrounding us, okay? They're around us. And seeing that we're surrounded with this great cloud of witnesses, let us lay aside every weight and the sin which does so easily beset us, or the difficulty, and let us run with patience. The King James says, the New King James says endurance. Let us run with patience the race that is set before us. Now, it sure does help. Okay, it sure does help me. And we're going to pick on Chuck again. Say if I have a besetting sin and I have a difficulties with a particular sin, okay, or you, whoever it might be, and I go to Chuck and I say, Chuck, I'm having difficulty with this particular sin. First of all, what should Chuck do? He should welcome me, right? I think sometimes the reason that we don't go to one another with the difficulties and trials and tribulations that we have is for what? What? Okay, that's one. That's pride. What else? Embarrassed. What's the third one? Oh, okay. Afraid they're going to tell somebody. Those are three or four good. What's another one, Chuck? Rejection. Fear of being rejection. And there's one more that I'm looking for, and I will tell you what. Judgment. They're going to judge me harshly. Well, why is it that you're struggling with this particular sin? Why is that hard for you? That's why I think we don't go to one another, because of these reasons that y'all just mentioned, and the judgment, because we're afraid people's going to think, well, come on, get over that. That's not that difficult. That's not that hard. Well, for them, it may not be. But for you, it may be a difficult thing to overcome. So that's what Paul is saying. We as a family should encircle one another. We should encourage one another. We should help. We should not be judgmental in the sense, now I'm not talking about saying that's okay. Well, that's okay. Everybody does that, so that's okay. That's not what we're talking about. In the sense of helping one another overcome. What does Paul say in Galatians 6? Brethren, if any man be overtaken in a fault, you which are spiritual, restore such an one in the spirit of meekness. What? Considering yourself, lest thou also be tempted. So, seeing we're encompassed about, let us lay aside the sins, and that's easier said than done. Let us lay aside the sin that so easily beset us, and let us run with what? Let us run the Christian race with patience. I'm not going to give you an advice, but I want to say something that I think would help us in our trials and tribulations. And please don't misunderstand what I'm saying, okay? Be patient with yourself. You understand what I mean? Okay, I'm not excusing a sin we commit, okay? For some things are harder than others, okay? Let me give you an example. We're going to give this is for Pinevale Children's Home. There is for an example, you got somebody who's hooked on drugs, okay? And they've been a drug addict for years, okay? Now, when they become a Christian and they come up out of that water, they are automatically forget about them drugs, right? Right? We don't believe that. We don't believe that. So, could they possibly stumble and fall and relapse, whatever? Could they do that? Sure they can, okay? So, in other words, I'm not saying excuse the sin. I'm not saying that. But through prayer, through study, through all of these things, through support, through encouragement, through treatment, all these other things, we need to, do you understand what I'm saying? We don't need to, if we stumble and fall again, we don't need to say, well, I can't do it, I might as well just quit, and that goes with any sin, okay? We need to work and labor and encourage one another so that we can run that race with endurance, with patience, okay? And how do we do that? Verse 2, we look to Jesus, the author and the finisher of our faith. Okay, so number one is we can do it through what we just talked about. Number two, quickly, we can do it through taking time in study and prayer. Paul says in Romans 10:17, so then faith cometh by hearing, and hearing by the word of God. How do I want, have you ever made the statement, I wish my faith would increase. I wish I was able to overcome the trials of life. My first question would be to myself, do I spend enough time studying? Well, I really don't. I don't spend much time in the book and reading and studying God's word. Well, there's part of your problem. There's part of your problem. We got to spend time in the book. Because if my faith is to grow and to increase, I got to spend time in the book. And I'll never grow and mature and overcome the trials of life unless I do. And not only study, but prayer. Okay? Prayer works. Prayer works. But what must I do with my prayer? I got to work my prayer. Let me make this statement. Lord, help us to grow here at Augusta Road. Help us to grow and to prosper and bless the things that we're involved in this congregation. Bless our works. Bless our efforts. Is that a good prayer to pray? Is it? That's a great prayer. Well, that's part one. How about part two? Do I do anything to work that prayer? If I want to evangelize, am I evangelistic? If I pray a prayer and I don't do anything about my prayer, that's worthless. Prayer's not going to work if I don't activate my prayer. Okay? That brings us to number 3. And this is where we're going to spend most of our time. I want to read some passages of Scripture, and I'm going to give some out. Raise your hand if you would like to read. 1 Thessalonians chapter 5 and verse 22. Anybody want to read that one? Adam? 1 Peter chapter 2 verse 11. Anybody? If you don't raise your hand, I'll start nominating. All right. 1 Peter 2, 3. 1 Corinthians 15, 33. Matthew 18, 8 through 9. Steve? Wake him up, Hope. And I think that's it. Okay. Now, let me give you a little background in all of these. You'll notice a common thread in all of these, okay? And when I was studying for this, I'm not talking to y'all. I'm talking to me, okay? These are things I really believe will help us overcome, and we're going to get into them just a little bit. These things will help me overcome the temptations and the trials of life that I face, and maybe that you face as well, okay? 1 Timothy chapter 5 and verse number 22. Who's got that one? I'm sorry, 1 Thessalonians 5 verse 22. What does it say? Abstain from every form of evil. Okay, let's dig into that passage just a little bit. Okay, what does it not say? Okay, it does not say abstain from evil, does it? Does it say that? It doesn't say abstain from evil. What does it say? Abstain from every form of it. Is there a difference? Yes, there is a difference. The King James says, I think, abstain from every appearance of evil. Okay? So we don't just, and we do abstain from evil, we do that. I'm not saying that. But Paul says, abstain from the very appearance of evil. Yes, okay. But well, what I mean is, when he says abstain from the appearance of evil, let me tell you what I'm talking about. Let's say that there's something I want to do, okay? And I know that there is a possibility if I do that, what's going to happen? You see where I'm going? You don't see where I'm going. Well, what I'm saying, okay. No, no, no. I'm not talking about right. What I mean, let me do the best I can, give a scenario. Say for an example, if okay, I'm gonna bring this up. Adam, you want to say something? What? Well, give me an example, then I'll give y'all one. Go ahead. Okay, and say you're an alcoholic. Is it wrong? Is it wrong to be in a car wash? Well, certainly not. Is it wrong for you to go to a car wash at a bar? Well, not in and of itself, but what could that lead to? That's my point. That's my point. Or what about this? I'm gonna bring this up. Say, oh, y'all ready? Sit back. Sit back. For an example, say for an example, is there anything wrong with swimming? No. I can swim. My wife can't. But say for an example that swimming in and of itself isn't wrong. But what about if I go somewhere where people are clad in half nakedness? Is that the appearance of evil? Would that lead me to do something or think something? You see the point? Okay, Brother Brady.
Grape juice in the communion.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, since I was used to attending at another place and they had just regular grape juice, it was a little bit offensive to me. But this congregation had done this for years. And if they remembered the Lord's Supper in the proper way, what little bit of alcohol was in a shot glass, or what you might say a shot glass, might not have affected most of them. But I can also see that if there was someone that was affected by alcohol very badly in that congregation, that it might have caused them to start drinking again.
Yeah. I guess what I'm saying is we need to be careful to the sense that something in and of itself, and we're not dumb, we're not stupid. We know us, better than anybody else knows us. Okay, so we don't need. And I think Adam's example was a good one, probably better than mine. But the point is something in and of itself may not be wrong. But something connected to in and of itself can make me wrong. You see the point?
Totally. And I'm not trying to be combative.
No.
I agree with what you're saying. 1 Thessalonians 5:22 is certainly letting us know that we are not to get as close to sin as we can without
Right.
getting, which is the mentality that a lot of people take. Let me see how close I can get to it without doing something that's technically wrong. Well, 1 Thessalonians 5:22 is your, hey, knock it off. You can't do that.
Right. You're pushing the limit.
Pushing the limit. And it has also been used
No, no,
I don't want to. I don't want to just pile on with examples because
No.
I don't think there's a perfect one we've got yet. But some people take strong offense to a song leader getting up and using a pitch pipe.
yeah.
Well, that looks bad, quote unquote. That looks bad. Somebody might say. And there have just been a lot of otherwise good churches who have just
Right.
turned the ignition off and idle because they're afraid
Sure.
of doing something that somebody somewhere might have to be.
Right. I'm not talking about matters of judgment, things that don't matter. Okay. I'm talking about hard case, you know you don't need to do this. That's what I'm talking about. I'm not talking about carpet color, pitch pipes, or video screens and songbooks. I'm not that. I'm talking about something that's dead wrong, because I know in and of itself, if I do this of itself, and it's not wrong in and of itself, but something that's connected to it that can draw me to that, that's wrong. You see the point? That's what I need to stay away from. You see the point?
Because the Lord prayed, lead us not into temptation.
Right.
Obviously, we need to live a life that reduces our exposure to temptation. And we need to handle our Christianity in a way that reduces other people's exposure to temptation.
Right.
Because we don't want to play with fire.
Well, I don't want you to cause me to sin, and I don't want to cause you to sin. It's a double-edged sword, you see. I don't want you to cause me to sin, and I don't want to cause you to sin. You see what I'm saying? So it's whatever's connected to him that's definitely wrong. Again, not matters. Hold that thought, Pam. I want to get to 1 Peter 2:11. I'm going to get to you, I promise. 1 Peter 2:11. Who's got that, brother? Go ahead.
Beloved, I beg you as sojourners and pilgrims, abstain from fleshly lusts which war against the soul.
Abstain from fleshly lust which war against the soul. You combine that one, 1 Peter 2:11, with what Paul says in 1 Thessalonians 5:22. You combine those together. Another one, 1 Corinthians 15:33. 1 Corinthians 15:33. Okay.
Deceived, evil communications corrupt good manners.
Okay. Don't be deceived. Okay. And I think that's the key. Don't be deceived. Okay. Don't think that you can, and this is what my daddy always told me, don't be deceived into thinking you can sleep with the dogs and not get fleas, or sleep with the dogs and not smell like the dogs. Okay. Many of us have been deceived into thinking we can do that. It's like, we want to see, and again, I'm preaching to myself. I'm not just talking, I'm talking to myself first. We want to see sometimes how close we can get without doing wrong. Well, that's not what Paul says. He says, you abstain from the very appearance of evil. You abstain from that which is evil. Not judgmental, and we're going back to that, but that which is evil. He defines it. That which you stay away from, as far away as the east is from the west. The last one will help connect it all. Matthew 18, I think that's what I said. 8 and 9, who's got that?
And if thy hand or thy foot causeth thee to stumble, cut it off and cast it from thee. It is good for thee to enter into life maimed or halt, rather than having 2 hands or 2 feet to be cast into the eternal fire. And if thine eye causeth thee to stumble, pluck it out, cast it from thee. It is good for thee to enter into life with 1 eye, rather than having 2 eyes that cast into that hell of fire.
So what is Jesus saying? If my hand causes me to stumble, so do I just go to the doctor and get it cut off? Is that what Jesus is saying? Or my eye, if I have a problem with looking where whatever, do I literally pluck my eyes out, or my foot, or what? What does he mean? Okay, but what does he mean? Okay, is he literal here, or is he using it in a figurative sense? Yeah, hey, exactly. Go to a different car wash. Whatever it is, and he's not talking physically, he's talking he's talking whatever it may be that causes me to stumble. Stay away from it. Stay away from it. If I know I got a problem with, and I was an alcoholic, and I have a problem with drinking, I don't even go by a liquor store, okay? Whatever, and there's tons of scenarios, whatever it is that affects me spiritually, that sin that so easily besets me, or that sin that TV, okay? Things we watch on TV, places that we go that may draw us away from God. We need to be careful about those things, okay? And I think what Jesus said in Matthew 18, which is more important? Which is more important? Enjoying the pleasures of sin or going to heaven when life is over? That's what Jesus is saying in Matthew 18. Take it out. Take it off, okay? Anybody got a thought? Pam, I'm sorry. Did I mess you up? Okay. All right. In the time left, I want to hit something else, okay? I want to kind of go to a different scenario. Temptations and trials, are they always bad? No. I want to look at some passages. I'm going to give you this one, and you can read it at home. James 1, 1 through 3. James says, James 1. When you fall into manifold temptations, knowing that the trying of your faith works patience. Okay? So temptations and trials aren't always bad. Okay? Look, one of my favorite is in 2 Corinthians. Look in 2 Corinthians chapter 12. And if I don't have time for that one, I want you to read Hebrews 11, 13 through 16. You can read that one at home. But I'm going to spend maybe the rest of the time on 2 Corinthians chapter 12. And this is dealing with, anybody know right off the bat? Paul's thorn in the flesh. Okay? We don't know what that thorn was. People subsidize or whatever it is, but Paul had a difficulty. He had a thorn in the flesh. He had a besetting sin, if you will. And he says in verse 7 of 2 Corinthians chapter 12, lest I be exalted above measure by the abundance of the revelations, a thorn in the flesh was given to me, a messenger of Satan to buffet me, lest I be exalted above measure. Concerning this thing, I pleaded with the Lord 3 times that it might depart from me. Okay? 3 times. Have you ever struggled with something in your life, a sin or a difficulty or a trial or a temptation, and you beg the Lord, please remove this difficulty, this trial, this whatever it may be, please remove this from me. And it seems like that the Lord's not listening. Okay? The Lord's not listening to me. All right? So we think, well, I'll have to fight this the rest of my life. I have to deal with this difficulty the rest of my life. Paul did. So there may be things in my life I have to deal with the rest of my life because of some choices and decisions that I made in my life. I may have to deal with them the rest of my life. Is that going to be a difficult thing? Yes. Is it going to be a hard thing? Yes. Is it going to be a bad thing? Most people say yes. But it doesn't have to be, okay? Listen to what Paul says. God said to him in verse 9, and he said to me, my grace is sufficient for you, for my strength is made perfect in weakness. Therefore, most gladly, I will rather boast in my infirmities, that the power of Christ may rest upon you. Verse 10, therefore, I take pleasure in iniquity or in infirmities, in reproaches, in needs, in persecution, in distresses for Christ's sake. The last part. For when I am weak, what? Then I am strong. Folks, when we're on top of the mountain all the time and problems don't ever come, I'm not going to grow. I'm not going to grow. But when I'm down in the valley and things are hard and things are difficult and there's trials and tribulations and temptations and difficulties, that's when we grow. That's when we grow. Why? Why? And I'm asking you, is that a lie from me or is that true? When we're in the valley, that's when we grow, right? Is that true or false? Why is it true? Patience. Okay, I don't get what I want when I want it. That teaches patience. And there's something else. There's other things it does. What are they? You keep your eyes on God. That's what Paul says in Hebrews 12, verse 2. I keep my eyes on God and I focus on Him. And Sister Rebecca, instead of putting my faith in me, I know I can't do it. I know I can't deal with it. I know I can't overcome it. So where does my trust go? It goes from me to God. Because He can. Okay? What was you saying, Adam? Okay? It gives you a better perspective. What else does it do? It humbles me. It humbles me. Yes, sir. Look at Job. When I'm down and I've stumbled and I've fallen, it helps me realize, hey, I ain't as great as I think I am. I'm not a superhuman, super Christian. I stumble and fall too. And that helps me, and it helps you. It helps me help you, and helps you help me. Right? That's the community that we live in. When I realize I'm not all that great and I depend on God for my substance, that humbles me. Okay? And let's go back to where we were starting before. If we would just be what we should be as a family, and when someone comes to me with a difficulty and a trial, like Brother Chuck was saying, let's don't judge them. Let's help them. Let's don't condemn them in the sense of, what do you think you're doing? Let's encourage. Say, you can overcome this, okay? And I'm going to go back to the drug issue. If I have a problem with drugs, and I'm going to pick on Chuck again. Chuck's never dealt with drugs. But Anthony has. Anthony was a drug addict. Okay? Who am I going to go to? I'm going to go to Anthony. I'm not going to Chuck. Well, we could, yeah. But I'm going to Anthony. Why am I going to go to Anthony? He's been there. And he knows what it's like. Okay? So I think it's important for us as Christians. If we've made mistakes, I'm not saying get up here and say, okay, Dustin, it's your turn. Tell the bad things you've done all over your life. I'm not saying that. But when I guarantee you, in a congregation of God's people all over the world, there is somebody in the Lord's church has done every sin that there is. Would you believe that? I guarantee you. There is somebody in the Lord's church that's committed at least one of the sins in the Bible. Now, I'm not saying everybody's committed them all, but it gives us comfort, as Paul says in Galatians 6, 1 through 2, bear ye one another's burdens and so fulfill the law of Christ, considering yourself lest you end up where they are. If I know that Anthony struggled with this, that builds that bond stronger, doesn't it? It does. It builds that bond stronger. And it helps me. It helps him. But how do I know that? I don't go around to everybody. If I'm a drug addict, I'm going to go to Buddy and say, Buddy, you done drugs before? You know. We need to make ourselves, whether we have or not, accessible. We need to, with a humble and kind and forgiving and a helping heart, we need to let everybody come to us, no matter what they've done. And if I can't help you, God will, but we can work together and you can overcome this. You and I and God can overcome this difficulty that you're facing. And I'm going to help you. But not just me. Everybody else can. And most of all, God will. There ain't nothing that we can't overcome. Nothing we can't. Brother Sam?
We haven't talked about this, but in some cases, when we commit sin and we realize very grievous, sometimes we experience self-condemnation.
Yeah, we talked about that last week, Sam.
Oh, you did? Okay.
Yes, sir.
Oh, not here.
No, I didn't mean to cut you off, but we talked about that. We just don't want to forgive ourselves.
But what we can do is when our hearts condemn us in the sin that we have done, number one, when I'm studying with people on the telephone, first refer them to 1 John chapter 3, verse 20. If you condemn yourself because of the sin, you should realize that God is greater than your
Than
heart
your sin.
and He knows all things.
Yes.
And you realize that, then you go to Him. 1 John chapter 1, 7 to 9.
Yes.
You know, you go to Him and confess it. So all these things can help us when we sin.
Yes. I want to look at Hebrew. I want to leave this week. I know we're almost out of time. Hebrews chapter 11, verse 12. Or verse 13. Take this home and read it, okay? This is powerful. Therefore, these all died in faith, not having received the promises, but having seen them afar off, and were assured of them, embraced them, confessed that they were strangers and pilgrims. When I'm in the bottom of the barrel and I'm going through difficulties and trials in my life, and me and Buddy talked about this yesterday. When I'm and things aren't going good and things are hard and difficult, through faith's eye, let's understand that we're not here forever. We're not going to be here forever. And as these men and women did of old, let's confess we're strangers and pilgrims. Let's look beyond the moment. Let's look beyond the right now and look to the place that God's prepared for us. That helps us overcome the difficulties and trials we face. I didn't mean to go over. Thank y'all. Next week, we'll get into one more promise, then we may go on to another section.